Alright, we're here to talk about Jean-Claude Van Damme, martial arts legend and hero to me and my brother since we were kids. You know, it took me a bit to come around, about 20 years or so, but I'm right there with it now. And how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. This is like a culmination for me, a very proud moment because, as you said, I tried to get you into this over the years, and now you love it just as much as I do, really. You love Van Damme. This is a very proud moment for me.
I mean, like I was saying earlier, I never really thought I'd own about 40 of his movies already, and still got to add a couple, so.
Yeah. And, yeah, Van Damme was always, I always loved action movies, but Van Damme was, the top of the top for me, So, to see him have such an extensive career is a testament to how many people that he's influenced.
I mean, yeah, he's a, 80s, genre icon, and he's still, pumping them out. I mean, we have, hopefully, The Tower coming within the next year or two.
Yeah. Yeah, we got The Tower. I really can't wait to hear more about that, And Chris Van Damme. I hope Chris Van Damme starts doing his own movies. Maybe this is like the passing of the torch type thing.
Yeah.
We'll see. And then we also got Full Love, that movie that's been in the works. I think it's finally coming out too. So.
Yeah. Well, has it been like in the works for like half a decade or something?
Yeah, I think since like 2009 or 2010. So.
Yeah. A decade, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It sounds like one of those plots I could actually get into, story-driven type of thing.
Yeah, the little teasers we've seen that look good, So.
But yeah, I mean, there are so many greats, within the genre, from your Norrises to, like some of the lesser-known ones like you were talking about with, David Bradley and Matt Malcolm and things like that. Then you talk about Norris, you talk about DeCascos, who are all great, but yet it's always kind of come down to Van Damme for us. So
it has.
Yeah.
You always see the term Van Damme wannabes for other people, but I don't take that as a knock. It's just he was so inspiring.
Yeah.
Like Norris was. But Van Damme took it to another level with just, I think, with some of his films. And he had the personality that made people watch his movies that weren't necessarily martial arts fans either, So, as we're going to get into with our top 10 coming up here, he has a movie pretty much for every kind of fan, every kind of mood. So, there's a lot to like, and that's why his movies are so rewatchable.
Yeah, it's like I've even tried to apply it to my fiance, trying to figure out a compromise for her to watch one of them. Would it be a straight up, martial arts flick, or should it be one that meshes with sci-fi or something? Or
yeah. Yeah. So I'm excited to get into this. We've talked about our list to each other before, but anytime I can spread my favorite Van Damme movies around, I'll take that opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. Alright, so do you want to kick us off, or do you want me to take it?
This is your show, so you can start it off.
Alright, well, I did want to run through just a couple or a few honorable mentions, though. One that was just barely not on the list that you haven't actually watched yet, man. That is Until Death.
Okay, yeah.
Until Death was one of Van Damme's 2000s flicks, and I gotta say, I think it might have been one of his most prominent dives into a really different psyche for one of his characters, and definitely one of his most morally gray roles. And what he does so well here is that he portrays it in a realistic way while still having the presence he always does. And it just doesn't feel like another Van Damme flick. It feels like he's actually trying to mix it up for himself, and he's actually interested in the work. you have some pretty visceral, somewhat violent shootouts, but it really comes down to this character's sort of drive and what he's going to do in possibly this last part of his life or not. And I don't know, I was just impressed by it. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but the ending, it gives you some interpretation, but just enough while not being thrown in your face either. I liked it a lot.
Yeah, that's one, like you said, I was ashamed I haven't seen, any Van Damme movie I haven't seen, I'm ashamed by. So. And, I like to see Van Damme do some different stuff. I'm not one of those fans that say that he has to do his helicopter kick in every movie or else I don't like it.
I think we both know a couple people like that at least.
Yeah.
Not naming names there, but I'm going to try and run through these honorable mentions a little bit quicker, but
okay.
Another one is The Order, which I just had the fiance watch. That was another one. It was one of Charlton Heston's last film roles as well. And you also have Brian Thompson as our main sort of a cult villain in it. And it sort of has like a, an action-adventure type vibe, a sense of fun, like in what some people think of a classic Jackie Chan movie or something like that. Van Damme plays a character named Rudy, and it's enjoyable. It has some really nice, solid choreography and fight scenes, and I really enjoy the foot chase through the town as well, and a good female lead as well. And then I also wanted to bring up, In Hell. I really enjoy that. It's going to tie into another movie I'm going to mention later, but another one of those more character-driven ones. And then The Shepherd that he did with Scott Adkins at one point as well as one of his better 2000s flicks.
Oh yeah, I love The Shepherd.
Yeah.
Anything directed by Isaac Florentine, and like you said, the first on-screen appearance, or from Atkins and Van Damme together, special, So.
All right, I'm gonna let you either name some, or if you want to start with your number 10, it's up to you.
All right. Well, since there's so many Van Damme movies I love, I'm just gonna rattle off a few that are my honorable mentions. But as you know, I've been struggling with what's number 10, and I'm still struggling with that as I talk. But I'm just gonna say that's a few honorable mentions that aren't on my 10 list, but I love as well. And one of them is Cyborg. That's so close to making my 10. I love the whole B-movie vibe. I love the post-apocalyptic thing. It's just a memorable, over-the-top, fun movie that, we don't see anymore.
I mean, without spoiling it, I am a bit offended by its lack of, rank, but it's like, even with one more I might bring up, even when we don't have him on, like, narrow down to a top 10 list, his massive body of work leads us to still really enjoy a bunch of others that don't necessarily make it, but they're still on the same playing field in a lot of regards.
Oh yeah, of course. I love Cyborg. But this is like picking your children here. So, alright, then another one would be I guess I'm gonna go with Sudden Death. That's an honorable mention. This was in my 10 at one point as well.
Yeah, I really like that one. I'm not as pained by it as Cyborg personally, which we'll get into later, but I'm a little surprised. I remember you talking up that one to me a lot before I watched it.
Yeah. Well, I always say I'm a sucker for Die Hard type movies, and it's like it competes with Die Hard in a lot of ways. It's that good. Memorable characters, set pieces, and everything. And Van Damme is great in it, but it seems like I don't know. It seems like it could be played by a Stallone or something too. There's not a ton of martial arts, but
I mean, I think I read somewhere that, they're actually, had a few different options for that they went with, or a couple turned it down. But, I know a lot of martial arts, but you have, like, Powers Booth.
yeah.
I mean, who I think is arguable against, as good as Alan Rickman was in Die Hard. I think they're similar caliber antagonists, at least.
Yeah, he's on that level. Howard Booth is a great actor, and one that you got to see him in another movie I've been recommending to you, but we won't get into that today. Let me just name off a couple more just real quick. I don't know where it's on my list necessarily, but it's one I love. It's called Desert Heat.
Oh, yeah, Desert Heat.
Desert Heat.
Inferno.
Such a different, underrated Van Damme movie from the late 90s. And I'm also mentioning I love The Shepherd as well. And then, but yeah, that's a few honorable mentions. We could talk on and on about those too. I'm going to leave it at that.
Alright.
So we can get into our top 10 here.
Well, one more honorable mention for me. Since you're kind of, poking at the hornet's nest here, I got one more to bring up too.
Oh boy.
Last honorable mention is Hard Target. Again, doesn't mean I don't like it. I like every Van Damme film. I automatically buy all his work. It definitely has its place, as Mullet versus Norris's. It's definitely debated. I can't say the action isn't well filmed or anything, Lance Henriksen obviously. But I don't know, it feels... it's hard for me to, put it down very much, but for me, like, it just felt a little bit more expected, a little bit just that bigger action movie I would think of, and that's not, it doesn't seem like a bad thing either, but I don't know, there are just certain movies that felt a little more distinguished, a little bit more Van Damme for me, and I don't know. Then again, he does that crazy kick and knocks the cigar out, so.
Yeah, no, I can.
And there's a lot of gunplay. It's not a lot of martial arts necessarily, but.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I said about Sudden Death, great big theatrical action movie, which was good for Van Damme's career, But I think everybody that truly loves Van Damme, loves the more martial arts centric movies. Not to say that other ones we've mentioned, aren't great too, but we love all these movies. But if we're doing a 10, we gotta get kind of nitpicky here. So that's why these 10 lists are a lot of fun, different opinions. So.
Alright, well, we should get into it before we start naming all the movies and have it go for a couple hours, so.
Alright.
Yeah.
Alright, since you named your honorable mentions first,
yep.
I guess I'll do my number 10 first. And that's going to be, drum roll please, that's going to be Universal Soldier. A Universal Soldier. I've been struggling with where to rank this one, as, but when it comes down to it, seeing Van Damme and seeing Lundgren go head to head in their prime is, the wet dream, if you will, of the action fan. And that's one of the best climatic fights at the end that, in movie history to me. And it's like Van Damme's attempt at Terminator, spawning off that type of deal,
I mean, he had Arnold visiting him on the set and everything, too.
So trying to capitalize on that phenomenon, which they did really, So I gotta give it some love at number 10.
Yeah. Well, I have more to say about that one, but, we'll save that a little bit.
Alright.
My number 10 is going to be Death Warrant. And that was actually written by David Goyer, who's gone on to actually write some of the DC stuff, actually, that I've personally really enjoyed, for the most part, Man of Steel especially. But Death Warrant, I mean, it's simple. I mean, it's one my fiance liked to actually have, Patrick Kilpatrick as the Sandman, this really kind of creepy even just for his eyes alone. Criminal that ends up almost leaving Van Damme with some PTSD type of thing. And meanwhile, Van Damme's infiltrating a prison undercover. We have Cynthia Gibb, who I think is one of the nicer looking Van Damme girls, if you want to say that. But there's some really, really nice fights throughout. Especially the last one. You can't really beat Van Damme kicking him into, what is it, not the boiler, you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I have so much to say about that movie, too. So.
Or Van Damme putting his arms out and yelling, "Come on!"
Yeah, there's so many classic moments in that movie. And like you said, with the one I mentioned, I have a lot more to say about that coming up here in a little bit. So, just a little teaser there.
So it has a nice little, gloomy vibe to it at times with that Sandman character and the aura they give him in a way, I guess. So yeah, Death Warrant is my number 10.
I'm happy to see you make your list. But so that's a good way to kick it off with Universal Soldier and Death Warrant. My number 9 is going to be one that is a very, very important movie in my fandom for Van Damme. My recent fandom, I should say. And that's a very important movie in Van Damme's filmography. It's none other than 2004's Wake of Death.
Oh, wow.
It's very, very important to me. As big as a Van Damme fan as I was growing up, watching his 80s and 90s movies, like a lot of people, life happened and I lost track of Van Damme for a little while there, And Wake of Death is one that I've since gone back and watched in recent years for the first time, And it's an important movie in that he proved that he can still do what he does at a very high level, and he can still make one of the best movies of his career that laid on, And I just love the movie, the way it's shot, the vibe of it. It gives Van Damme a chance to show off, his serious acting skills. But then you got some of the most coolest, epic Van Damme moments in the later parts of the movie that I remember watching and said, okay, now this is a Van Damme film. I was so happy to see him still, doing that stuff in 2004. I love the motorcycle chase, and of course the finale on that ship or whatever, when he calls out the guy, he's yelling. That just, it's a throwback in that with the action in it, and I love it. So, yeah, I got to give some love to Wake of Death at number 9.
Yeah, I like that pick of yours. I remember that was one I think I watched before you too, but
yeah.
But yeah, I'm happy to see that. I mean, there's a decent sort of emotional drive for Van Damme's character. I think makes it a little bit more dense, but in a good way.
Yeah.
And then I like the lighting in it as well. It's dark, but like you said, when he confronts the guy on that ship, I think it's actually kind of blended nicely with that, and kind of like the scopes and the not laser pointers they're using, but it has a decent mood to it, and it felt like a pretty focused narrative.
Yeah, and me as a martial arts nerd, seeing the introduction of another martial artist, I like Tony Sienna in that movie. He gets in on the great action finale at the end too. So.
All right, and my number 9 is one we actually talked about a little already, and that is Sudden Death.
Okay.
Came out in 1995, and I already talked up this one quite a bit. Not only does it have a good rival to Die Hard in both its premise and its villain in Powers Booth, but also has Raymond J. Barry, who's done a ton of work, not just in movies but in films. He plays, not just in movies but in television, excuse me, as the vice president. And I also really enjoy the aspect with his children in this. You have his his adorable little daughter who basically idolizes him.
For For once, the children in a movie aren't so stupid.
Yeah, yeah. His son actually kind of plays it like his dad is supposed to have taught him, you know? But,
yeah.
but you know, then his son is, you know, kind of resenting towards him because he hasn't, you know, really matured enough to understand what his dad might have went through on his job or whatever. But, you know, he looks up to him so much, you know, his kind of perspective on him is hurt through that, but of course Van Damme sort of wins him back, you know, through what he has to go through to get to him in this. And you have the Penguin fight and everything, and Van Damme's, you know, John McClane Rambo threat on the walkie-talkie. So yeah, I had to put Sudden Death on the list. That's why it's number 9 for me.
Yeah, I love it, and of course you got to mention the Penguin fight. Everybody mentions, and, but yeah, you know, I feel guilty about not putting it in my 10, but not every movie can make the 10, so I gotta stand with it.
You have a lot of tough choices in life, and this is one of them. So
this is one of the most important choices you could ever do, is ranking your top Van Damme movies. So
yes,
you know, someone's gotta do it, and we're doing it. So all right, and then we're gonna get to my number 8. This is a movie that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. It's in Van Damme's prime era of movies, and it's one that always hits close to home for me. I always loved it growing up. It's Nowhere to Run. Nowhere to Run comes in at number 8 for me. This movie has so much going for it. I think it's one of Van Damme's most interesting characters, really. You know, a different kind of character for him. He's not a great, well, I mean, you know, he's on the run. He breaks out of prison, even though, you know, he was there wrongfully. But he was involved with not so good people, you know.
I mean, doesn't he, I forget if he actually kills that guard on the bus when he escapes when it crashes, or?
I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
I think he does.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, Nowhere to Run, it just sticks with me from everything from the cover. I used to have on VHS to characters, and, you know, Rosanna Arquette is talking about Van Damme girls. Yeah, that's always been one of my favorites, and it has a lot to like about the movie. I think a lot of people might not necessarily be Van Damme fans, but still like the movie. And, you know, you got the kids in it. Rory Culkin, Macaulay Culkin's lesser known brother is great in it. And you got good action, you know, you got some good fights in it, not martial arts fights, but somehow I love how they do it, because they still make it really good and interesting in that aspect as well. So, and then, you know, a lot of good scenes, the motorcycle chase and everything. I've just always loved his character, Sam, and Nowhere to Run. He's a stalker, but he's a good stalker.
I mean, forget about how he was just watching the widow through the window at the beginning of the movie.
So,
but yeah, you're rooting for him.
Yeah, this is one I could rank even higher. I probably will if we did this list another time, but for now, Nowhere to Run is going to be my number 8.
And you give me a stab of guilt with that, because that's another one I wish I would put on my list too. But
son of a bitch, you didn't even add it in your honorable mention.
We were talking about time constraints and that.
Alright, so.
Yeah. I think that's the one our dad always brings up. I guess it's his favorite that he can remember anyway, so.
Yeah, I remember him talking about that.
Yeah.
Really, too.
Whenever I bring up Van Damme, he always says, I like Nowhere to Run, so. Yeah.
Alright, so.
Alright, my number 8 is one I actually could have put a little higher, but I've nudged it up periodically, and it's one you probably won't be surprised by that I'm so fond of, and that's Replicant.
Okay.
Which came out in 2001 and was obviously directed by Ringo Lam, who worked closely with Van Damme in more than one film. I mean, there's Maximum Risk as well, and I've just been a big fan of Replicant. I mean, ever since I found it on Blu-ray for $2 or $3 at a local video store.
Yeah.
It was. I think it was one of the first few Van Damme movies I watched when I got back into it.
It's one of those crossover movies too. You know, it has a lot of cool sci-fi type stuff going on. So, you know, it was a catalyst kind of for you getting into Van Damme. So.
Yeah, in a mesh of sci-fi, you have the, you know, I don't know if I want to say horror edge, but you have a thriller edge with, you know, Van Damme's serial killer character, and then sci-fi with an actual, you know, clone or replicant, you know, being made of him. And so you get, you know, probably a movie Van Damme at least had a little bit of fun with, you know, playing two different personalities. And another big part of it for me is Michael Rooker, who is great. He sticks out in anything from The Walking Dead to what he's doing in the MCU these days. And, like, honestly, it could have just been Michael Rooker chasing after Van Damme as a serial killer, and I still think it would have been an entertaining movie. Michael Rooker is a good protagonist as Jake Riley.
Yeah.
But I really like Van Damme's replicant character too. There's a little bit of humor in it when you see him getting used to just basic things like when it rains and how he reacts to that, or when he first learns to walk in that white room they're keeping him in.
Yeah.
He's kind of lumbering around like a monkey and doing, you know, some kind of you know, odd things, and they tie that into how he moves later in some of his fights, and you know, when the guards go after him and everything. And I really like the, I gotta mention the song that plays in the credits, Sunset Beach. I don't know if you can hear it in your head, but I can. I mean, I was just happy to see someone uploaded that song to YouTube, because I can't really find it anywhere else. But, you know, there's a bit of emotion towards the end, too, where you see the replicant, you know, struggling with, you know, whether to help Jake or, you know, trying to, you may believe that a serial killer is someone he should be with because of, you know, their ties together. So yeah, so get some good acting and a bit of emotive expressions from Van Damme at the end that I liked quite a bit.
Yeah, and I do like Replicant. You know, it's a unique movie for Van Damme for sure. I was gonna say Michael Rooker is one of the most underrated character actors for sure of all time. And, you know, one of my favorite scenes in Replicant is when Van Damme stands up for that hooker. Yes.
Thank you for mentioning that. And then the way he, like, yells and just sort of, like, lumbers after the guys in the apartment.
Yeah. So you know, I do like Replicant as well, and I can see why that, you know, you being such a big sci-fi / horror fan, you know, would really love that one. So.
Alright, so you.
Now it pains me to get to my number 7, as it's been so difficult to rank these movies. But I'm going to have to, this one has fallen a little bit for the time being on my list, but hey, it's still a number 7, so it still means I love the movie. And it's none other than Hard Target. You know, I say it's a blueprint for how to do an epic action scene, from how they do the shootouts to shootouts on bikes to, you know, so many great action scenes.
I remember his uncle riding off on a horse with a bow and arrow while their shack or whatever goes up and
Wilford Brimley is his uncle in it, you know. It'd been cool if he was in it a little bit more, but you know, it's my favorite John Woo movie. I know John Woo is, you know, known for a lot of his Hong Kong stuff, but you know, when I watch John Woo movies, Hard Target comes to mind. And, you know, it's not a martial arts movie, but as a martial arts fan, I feel like I got enough of that as well. You know, you got that.
I mean, I'll give a little bit of credit. You know, they did have some, you know, obvious, you know, Van Damme martial arts moments that you'd look for, but you know, it's also like a big, you know, like mainstream action movie for Van Damme, and I can be fine with him having one like that.
Yeah, it is a big one of his probably biggest budgeted movies he did. I think the movie that made the most fun is actually another one that's going to be on my list. I'll talk about in a little bit. But yeah, you know, I'm not a big Nancy Butler fan. She's okay in the movie. I think I would have liked it even better if it was with someone else.
Wow.
bad guys go, I just I love their characters. Lance Henriksen and Arnold Vosloo, however you say his name.
Mm-hmm.
Both are great bad guys in it.
Mm.
You know, the finale is awesome. It makes his kicks and gunplay.
Mm-hmm.
It inspired stuff that we see in the cinema these days, like your John Wick.
Mm-hmm.
By that I mean, people call it gun fu. How he has the guns in his hands to shoot, but he also does this, hand-to-hand stuff as well.
Mm-hmm.
You've seen that in the finale, I've always loved Hard Target, and it's always going to be on my list somewhere. So.
Well, I mean, hey, Yancy Butler, is one of her better things. I mean, she's done Lake Placid. And,
I do like those movies.
I'm also seeing she did, Drop Zone with Wesley Snipes. But
oh, yeah.
she even did, like, a short-lived comic book show called Witchblade at one point, too, which I've considered watching, but...
I feel bad. I don't hate her. I don't know.
I mean, I think, I like her eyebrows are kind of nice, but...
Yeah, she's okay in it. I think maybe it's the writing of her character.
Yeah.
Not so much her.
I mean, I guess they cut something out where they actually hooked up in the movie, but...
Yeah.
I mean, it felt like I was going that route, but I'm like, oh, wait, they actually didn't do it there. So...
She's good in it, and I will say Drop Zone. It's a cool movie. You should watch it. But anyway. But yeah, Hard Target is my number 7 pick.
Alright. My number 7 is probably the most obvious and, probably the most well-known general audience Van Damme movie, I'd think. And that is Bloodsport.
Okay.
Which came out in 1988. I mean, it's so prominent, even Donald Trump loves it, so... Not to get political here, but I just thought I'd mention that. And, I mean, it's directed by New Arnold. Screenplay was, co-wrote by Sheldon Littich, who is obviously a, big partner with Van Damme in some of his best work, both from a story standpoint and just, like, consistent entertainment value that, he brings out of his Van Damme films. Even Hard Corpse wasn't that bad. But Bloodsport, it's the most, like, classic, I don't know if I want to say traditional, but essential Van Damme film.
Yeah.
Even if it's not your number one, it's like, oh yeah, Bloodsport, you gotta talk about that one.
Yeah.
You have, Boyan as, Chun-Li.
Yeah.
A very unique name there, Chun-Li, right? Mortal Kombat. But you have Donald Gibb as Ray Jackson, kind of a big burly, biker buddy that he meets there, kind of a big personality at sort of contrast, but yet kind of meshes with Jean-Claude Van Damme as Frank and Dukes and stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, we have the great scene where Jean-Claude is blinded near the end of the fight, but then he does that again, that sort of signature yell and stuff, and then
yeah. That's often in memes today, but as in context, that's one of the most iconic scenes.
Yeah.
in martial arts movie history for sure.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think it's the one that just a general audience are aware of when it comes to him. Yeah. And then again with that Ray Jackson thing, one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie is right towards the beginning where you have them playing an arcade fighting game together.
Yeah.
That was fun, and there's even that, of course, the mentor aspect with the flashbacks and stuff, which, as you've told me, I don't give enough credit to, I'm talking about that and, like, Kickboxer and such, but, I do like that aspect of it here, too, and there's also a good foot chase, where he's, Forrest Whitaker running after him, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
Forrest Whitaker is in this movie.
Yeah. Before anyone really knew. He did some stuff, but,
Mm-hmm. Very straightforward, very much what you'd think it is, but it really set I think it set a precedent, again, or, like, reset a precedent for what these kind of movies are.
Yeah, for sure, and Usually I like Bloodsport a little bit, and I'm glad that it's on your list as well. And not to spoil it, but it'll be somewhere in mine. I don't know. For the audience listening. So we'll talk about that more here in a little bit. So now what are we? The number 6.
Yep.
And this is very important for every Van Damme fan to know, automatically know and remember their rankings of their Van Damme movies. So at number 6, that's going to be one that I recently bought the collector's edition Blu-ray of, and it's one that I love more and more each time I watch it. It's Double Impact.
Holy shit. Okay, we can both talk about it now because it's my number 6 as well.
Okay. So we finally have one that perfectly aligns. But yeah, like I said, I recently watched it again. The collector's edition, and it's just such a fun movie. And it could be stupid seeing two Van Dammes in it, but they made it work, and they made them so different from each other. But Van Damme has great chemistry with himself.
Yeah.
And they're polar opposites of each other in it, so it's cool to see what they did with each character.
I mean, it looks fine on screen for the time. I think there's like one scene inside that looks a little dodgy for like a few seconds, but for the most part, you can suspend your disbelief a little bit, and you can accept that they're twins, or maybe Van Damme has a real brother, like in some of those foreign Facebook groups, but
yeah, we won't get into that.
But again, this one is another one directed by Sheldon Littich, actually.
Yeah, this one was directed and written, I believe, as well by Sheldon Littich. And
yeah, co-wrote with Van Damme.
Yeah, I definitely recommend you and everyone out there get the collector's edition, MVD rewind edition of this, and Littich and Van Damme new interviews. Tori Everson, the big female bodybuilder bad girl in it, gives new interviews throughout. And there's just so many, memorable characters in it. You get him facing off against Bolo again. This time with a scar on his face.
Yeah, I mean, I almost like their fight here as much or more in some ways than the Bloodsport one, which is a lot to say, but I mean, obviously it's not quite as prominent, but it's still a good, callback. And
yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's still great. It's still a great fight, for sure. And you got Alex fighting another prominent martial artist, Peter Mullet. He does the fight choreography for the film, too. But yeah, Jeffrey Lewis is in it. And, it's just a really good cast. They're really fun. Like, they talk about it in the documentary. They said that they kind of wanted to put a little bit of James Bond elements in it. And I feel that, like, with the kind of different locations and the adventure. And then getting into the tuxedos, like, that was a nod to Bond.
Yeah, it reminds me of some of those classic Bond films that have that more kind of adventure feel to them. And again, that Littich instilled that fun factor, if you want to call it that. And
yeah,
I mean, I love Jeffrey Lewis too. I mean, he was in one of Mark Dacascos's best, Only the Strong, and he's here too. And again, I would have been fine if it, was just him, and even one Van Damme would have still been a good movie. But obviously, you have Chad and Alex here. I prefer Chad. I think he's a. It's just fun to see Van Damme play that more kind of optimistic personality initially.
Yeah, and you get your different character traits and stuff, but it's also interesting. They really kind of changed up the fighting style for each of them. Chad throws all the most of the kicks, and they made Alex have more lethal striking type. What he does, he uses the guns. But uses his fist more. But yeah, there's a different fighting style. There's quite a few headbutts in a movie.
Yeah.
So, but I like seeing the different things they came up with for both of them.
And they give Chad the Bolo fight.
Yeah.
And I've even had this in my intro on my channel for a while, but the yoga scene where we're first introduced to Chad at the studio.
Yeah, I love that scene.
Yeah.
You know, it just sets the tone for it's going to be okay. It's going to be a fun movie.
Mm.
And before we go on to our next pick, I have to mention Alana Shaw in the movie.
Mm.
Beautiful movie, blonde, and I really liked her in it.
Mm.
But one of the things I learned from watching the collector's edition, that part nearly went to one of my all-time favorites, Tia Carrere. Almost had that part.
Oh, you and Tia Carrere.
Tia Carrere. But yeah, she almost had it. Even showed a clip of her doing an audition with Van Damme for it. Because a lot of people would have made sense for Alex to have an Asian girlfriend since he's in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But, you know, Van Damme, I don't know. He thought it would be more marketable to have a big blonde, which I understand too. And Alana Shaw's, you know, good in it as well. But man,
I mean, yeah, there's a cultural aspect if they had some, like, you know, Tia in it, but and you get Van Damme's perspective wanting to appeal, like, to every market, I guess, from his standpoint of working kind of closely on the film, but then again, it could just be Van Damme's taste in blondes, who knows, so.
It worked, though, it worked. You know, I love Tia, and she's in plenty of other stuff, but it was a surprise to me, because I had no idea she was just about in Double Impact.
I mean, it's not to get off subject here, but it's like me ranting the other night about Eva Greenos being in certain movies and why the hell didn't they go with her? But,
you understand.
Yeah.
But Tia was in another movie that year, Showdown in Little Tokyo.
That little movie, yeah.
Yeah, we could do a whole episode about that movie. But, anyways, so that's both of our number sixes, so that's cool.
Yeah.
Alright, so who's going at number 5?
Well, yeah, you're the one that brought up Double Impact initially before I jumped on, so
Okay, so
I guess mine, but
okay.
Or yours.
Right ahead. Go right ahead, we'll dive into the top 5.
Alright. We're going with Timecop, actually.
Well, you know, just as number 6 was, Timecop is my number 5 as well.
Oh, fuck me.
We can both talk about it as our number 5 pick here.
I guess so. Alright, so, like I said, came out in 1994, and Peter Hyams, of course, directed it. You have Sam Raimi as one of the producers for it. Sam Raimi, of all people. And then you also have Mia Sara, who a lot of people know from Ferris Bueller's Day Off as well. I like her here. She's just as good. And again, one of those genre meshes we keep talking about.
It's my favorite. I will say, you know, rightfully so. So many people talk about Universal Soldier and Cyborg and stuff, but my personal favorite sci-fi Van Damme movie is Timecop. So this just always stuck with me, you know, from the amazing action in it, but just from the story of it. I just love the whole time travel thing and all that, you know. It adds a pretty impactful, provides some pretty impactful moments in it, you know.
For sure. And I mean, you know how I feel about both Cyborg and Universal Soldier, but like I'll say this, I think just focusing on like the story and the pacing and just how things come together, I do think Timecop is probably the best on that end. I'll say that.
A great cast too. You know, I really like Ron Silver as slick bad guy. You know, he's not physically imposing, but still he's memorable nonetheless. You know, and them traveling through time to stop him and all that.
He was a sneaky bastard, you know.
Yeah, he's also in one of my favorite Speakman films that we'll hopefully be talking about when you watch more Speakman. But we don't get into that. So.
Let's keep it on subject, but I can talk about Eva Green, but you can't talk about Speakman. Okay?
I'm throwing out other names because you're throwing out other names. So. But anyways, Timecop, you know, one of my favorite things was my cover photo on Facebook for a while.
Yeah, I remember.
That mall punk stealing the lady's purse and Dan stopping him with that awesome pose that he does. I watching?
Yeah, Jesus.
And that, it was definitely a shocker, when you first watch it, for sure,
And honestly, just with how attached to Van Damme I am, I don't like seeing him get killed, even if it's another version of him.
Yeah. As a kid, it kind of boggled my mind.
Yeah.
But it still boggles the minds of some people in that weird Facebook group, but I'm going to get into that. So,
did Van Damme actually die?
there's two Van Damme's in it again. So.
And it is, I think you're probably going to bring this up too, but it's Van Damme's still his highest grossing film as a lead actor.
Yep, that's his highest grossing movie.
Mm-hmm.
Huge, you can tell a big production was in it, Maybe the effects aren't great, but I still think they're pretty cool, like the way that time, whatever, machine travel vehicle works. I thought it's cool how they did that.
I don't think it was any worse than most of the other movies you could come up with like that from that, mid-90s time, so.
Yeah, and then Ron Silver's on death at the end was pretty cool.
I mean, I'm going to probably talk about this with my next film a little bit, but I'm a sucker for fight scenes at night in the rain.
Yeah, oh yeah.
It just brings automatic mood to it that kind of enhances what's going on.
Great visual and cinematography.
You have Mia Sarah climbing on the roof and everything, trying to get away while the Van Dammes are running around and stuff. And
Van Dammes are running around. I don't know, that was funny. But, so many iconic scenes in the fights are really well done.
Van Damme doesn't have his mullet, but still a hairstyle for the time.
Yeah, they changed it up so you didn't get confused with his past self, his present day self.
Right.
And I wish that Timecop spawned as many sequels as like Universal Soldier did or something. I think it really could have been a great franchise.
I mean, you said you've seen the first direct-to-video sequel?
Yeah, there's only one movie. It's Timecop 2.
Okay.
That's Jason Scott Lee. It's a really good movie, actually.
Yeah.
I'm surprised. They have their own story for it and everything, and it's good. I love that one, but I wish we could have got more with Van Damme as well,
Yeah, like maybe this spawned like a little franchise that maybe he would have returned to too,
Yeah, and I love Jason Scott Lee as well. So.
Like even if it wasn't like his same character, they could have just redone it like they kept doing at the Universal.
Yeah, I really wish that
You just keep coming up with slightly different, not like copy paste, but just kind of play with the premise a little and just have him.
Yeah. Exactly, and I really think it could have been a good franchise,
Mm-hmm.
There was even a TV series that I watched back in the day, very short-lived.
Yeah.
I liked it. With a different guy in it and everything. But it was good. Yeah, like I said, I just like that time travel stuff. So. And Timecop could be even higher on my list, depending on when you ask me, but top 5 is good. So.
Alright, and I guess I'll go my number 4 then.
Yeah, that's fine.
Alright, and my number 4, tying in a little bit, is the first Universal Soldier.
Okay.
And I think this was the first Van Damme film I watched when I got into it, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think you're right about that.
Yeah, so there's probably like an extra attachment, maybe a slight bias to me for keeping it in my top 5 for that reason, but I mean, I still think it's an all-around, pretty good one, undeniably. I mean, we have that Dolph Lundgren, villain aspect. I've grown to love Dolph so much as like the protagonist, but the way he gets into his villain roles too, he's over the top, but he puts a lot of energy into it, and as the what is his name, Andrew Scott?
Yeah, Andrew Scott, the ear collector.
Yes. Going a little Leatherface there, so which I don't mind, as you know.
He's just unhinged Lundgren in that movie.
Yeah. It was directed by Roland Emmerich.
Oh, yeah.
Who did a little movie called Independence Day a few years later.
That movie did pretty good.
Yeah. The sequel didn't, but that wasn't really,
No, still Independence Day is a good movie.
Except he also did Godzilla 1998, so... I mean, which is...
For every Universal Soldier in Independence Day, he has the Godzilla 98.
Yeah. He's like one of those directors like Michael Bay and, Spielberg's that, they have some clunkers, but then they have some ones that still appeal to a lot of people, too.
Yeah.
And, Universal Soldier, again, sucker for, fight scenes at night in the rain. It's, right there with that Timecop fight we just talked about, except, maybe I prefer it a bit more just because you have that concentrated one-on-one between him and Lundgren.
Right.
I'm guessing you've probably read about the alternate ending to it.
No.
Yeah.
You're catching me off guard. But, hey, I recently got a nice, I know it's like on 4K and Blu-ray now, but got a DVD of it, has special features, and it has, the alternate ending on there, I think. So,
yeah.
I'll have to watch it.
Yeah, you can read about it on IMDb, too, but...
Yeah.
I prefer the theatrical one anyway, but it's still interesting.
Still Van Damme.
Yeah. I mean, just something kind of different happens with his parents, and then basically just something after he gets rid of Dolph and such, but...
I'm gonna have to watch it, yeah.
So I'll leave that for you, but I still really like that fight scene in the rain where Van Damme ends up injecting himself, and he's a match for, Dolph, his enhanced strength and stuff like that, and...
Yeah.
Oh, what really keeps it afloat for me, though, I will say, is, Ali Walker in particular, who we've seen on, Sons of Anarchy in more recent years.
I hated her in Sons of Anarchy.
Yeah. She was good, though. She was good, and I like her here. It was kind of surprising how much I actually did. And then the diner scene is probably my favorite scene in the whole movie besides that final fight.
You got him.
Van Damme just wants to eat, and then...
Yeah. Yeah, you get a good fight scene in that, too, but, that's one of the funniest scenes. And,
who cares if he's destroying their supply of food and, just not paying for shit, just...
Yeah, that was a great classic scene for sure.
And even a scene my girlfriend, or fiance got kicked out of was when when they're at the hotel held up there, and then Van Damme just walks out, butt naked.
Yep.
And it almost gives the old lady a heart attack. There's that. Then when Ali Walker, has to get that tracker out of him or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And they just get that shot of Van Damme just like bending over just to look at her, full on eye contact.
She's good in it. She's good.
Yeah. So there's touches of humor. I like the scene where he arrives back at his home and everything, and
yeah.
I just really enjoy Universal Soldier. It, one of those great genre meshes, and again, maybe not the most original coming off of Terminator, but I still think it's one of the better within that realm.
Yeah, and they did their own thing with it, but obviously capitalizing on back in the 80s and 90s, I missed that time when machines, robots, and cyborgs were all the rage in the movies. And, so I like all kinds of movies, like that.
Yeah. So. And you had the great Arnold Schwarzenegger, visiting on set, whether it's to be friendly or, scope out his possible competition, I don't know, but...
Right.
But obviously, he still took it seriously enough, or he actually, liked what Van Damme was doing enough to be there, so I always thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely my number 4.
Yeah, and like I said, I felt like I had to put it in my top 10, so that should make you happy anyway.
Yeah, at least.
Well, that's what I said, at least when you named your number 10, which is coincidentally my number 4, which we're going into now. My number 4 is Death Warrant. Death Warrant, it's like you said, it's a simple premise. Undercover cop going in prison, whatever, but me being such a big fan of the lower budget, it's a lower budget Van Damme movie, kinda, and it has a B-movie vibe to me, and I love it for that. And it just has so many memorable moments to me. I've always had a soft spot for it for whatever reason.
There's that prominent henchman in it. I know I should know his name. I feel bad that I don't.
He's you can call him the henchman actually because he is the henchman. Al Young.
Yeah.
He just has a documentary out, The Henchman. So every time you see Al pop up in a movie, you're watching a classic action movie, and that's one of the better fight scenes of his career. That's one of his rapid fire, but we'll talk about that.
I mean, he looks crazy, the big mustache, the kind of longer, balding hair, and
he had a distinctive look.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite scenes in the movie, that laundry fight scene. But the Sandman, Patrick Kilpatrick, might be arguably my favorite Van Damme villain. It could be, I don't know. I've always loved him. He legit creeped me out watching it as a young kid. Getting into Van Damme movies, you got the horror vibe. Actually a scary looking guy who looks like he can't die, You can't kill him.
And it gave you like a buzzkill when you'd see Kilpatrick in Under Siege 2, and him just not even get a fight with Seagal. Not that many people actually did, but
yeah. Exactly. Right. Exactly. I just love him in that. I don't know. I just love that premise that the martial arts cop in prison. You get him throwing kicks here and there in that fight scene, but that fight scene is just classic. And like you said, I like what's her name? What's her name that is in it?
I said her name. Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
No, I don't, bud. Tell me.
I can't come up with it off the top of my head, but
Cynthia Gibb.
Okay, it was Gibb. Okay.
Yeah.
No relation to Donald Gibb? But yeah, she's good at it. And I just love the movie. And like I said, I've always had a soft spot for it. And there's similar films like this that they've tried to copy in the genre, which is one of my favorite David Bradley movies, Hard Justice.
The prison film is just like classics. I don't know if I'll say easy premise, but it's like it's a reliable one for the genre. I think so. Yeah,
for sure. And I think if it didn't have Sandman as a villain, it might not be as high on my list. But he just puts it over the top for me.
I mean, there's something to be said because this is one that my fiance brings up when she talks about movies of like this that she's actually liked. So something worked about it.
That's Warrant doesn't get talked about enough when you see people list their best Van Damme movies.
Yeah, on a different day I could probably bump it up a couple spots too. But.
Yeah, I just love Death Warrant. So,
and again, I don't know how true this is, but I think it was on IMDb or somewhere that this is an occasion where Van Damme actually beat out Seagal for the role.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
And I like Seagal, but, I can't see anybody else in it now,
You get into that weird mood for Seagal for sure, but I guarantee you if it was Seagal leading, we won't be talking about a Sandman fight as much.
Right, I agree.
Because you have some suspense with Van Damme doing it, Van Damme not being invincible.
Yeah.
And Van Damme being, as incredibly skilled as he is, he still likes to play it like an actual character and story and, keep you engaged.
Yeah, exactly. And I do like Seagal movies, so, but he's not Van Damme.
No.
So, anyways, now we're to number 3, our top 3.
Yes, we're there, finally.
I know this is going to be long, but for the people still listening right now, we appreciate it. And we know there's so many Van Damme fans out here, like us. And, I like, I never get tired of talking about Van Damme, so this is enjoyable for me.
Yeah. I mean, I'll probably listen to this whole thing again later because I like hearing people ranting about him too, so.
Yeah.
I guarantee you this is like one of the most like in-depth ongoing Van Damme videos on YouTube already, so.
I think we're doing pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So, alright,
Number 3, one I couldn't really do without, and that's Kickboxer, the original Kickboxer from 1989.
Before you get into it, I should mention that was on my honorable mentions. It's off
What?
at number 10. That's off at number 10 for
You
me.
mean it's number 3 too?
Yeah, right. But anyways, I'll say that's an honorable mention.
And you got on me for forgetting to mention Hard Target initially, so.
Oh, I did forget.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, okay, well. This is definitely in the same vein as, Bloodsport. You could say they go hand in hand. Very similar premises, granted. And yeah, you had that mentor aspect in Bloodsport too, but I think this one is played out a little bit more extensively. You have some of the training scenes and the montages and such. The coconuts being dropped on him.
Mm-hmm.
How it cuts just before it hits him and his expression.
Mm-hmm.
And him kicking the bamboo over and over or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I gotta give, I'm probably gonna mispronounce his name. He's had a lot of roles in these movies, but Michael Tunpo,
Michael Kissy.
Kissy.
That's how I say it. So
Okay.
that's my guess.
Kesey?
Yeah.
But, you can't really describe Bolo Yan at all, but from a character standpoint, I do think Tunpo is a bit of a better villain. That's because of what he does to, his mentor's daughter and Van Damme's love interest in the movie.
Yeah.
It adds that layer of, Chun-Li was kind of an arrogant prick as well, but you have Tunpo, who's, we see lowered to this level, and it makes you hate him more, and it makes you want to see, Van Damme or, Kurt Sloan take him down, and it adds, like, an extra, sense of, urgency or weight to, what he's doing, if you want to analyze it like that, but...
Yeah.
And the way he finds out about it, like, mid-fight and how that kind of propels it, I think is, good. Then you have them putting the glass on their hands, with the wraps and such.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think it's, like Bloodsport, it's an absolute classic. It's not the most, complex of his work or anything, but it's one of those essentials that, again, I don't think you can really do without or talk about when it comes to Van Damme. So.
Yeah, it's a straight-up martial arts movie that set the benchmark, really for, the genre that spawned so many imitators, And I really do like Kickboxer as well, But when thinking about my top 10 list, it's hard to pick, so you gotta really think about it. And I thought about it as my Desert Island list. And if I only had 10 Van Damme movies, I wanted to change it up a little bit. Since Kickboxer is, we'll get into Bloodsport here in a little bit.
Oh, boy.
But I always thought of it as so like Bloodsport, so that's why I kind of had it lingering on my 10 and honorable mentions list, but I still love the movie, and I think Dennis Chan is the name of the actor who plays the trainer in it.
Yeah, that's right.
In the first 3 Kickboxer movies, so.
Mm-hmm.
He has a lot of personality to it as well.
I haven't watched the Kickboxer sequels. They write characters off screen and say they died, so I don't know. But.
Oh, but you still gotta see him, man. Don't be the guy that just watches theatrical movies.
I don't just watch theatrical movies,
Oh, we can argue about this for an entire episode, direct-to-video sequels.
Yeah.
But those sequels are worth watching for him alone.
Well, you had the reboot movies he did, there's Vengeance and...
yeah.
Which I actually enjoyed as well. Those were other honorable mentions I could have brought up, but... I think Van Damme has a cool character in that one. He plays the mentor character instead, but...
I really do like him in that one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wish he was in it more.
Yeah, I actually prefer the first one because he gets a little more to do in that, but I like the blind aspect in the sequel as well with Tyson, so...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. I'm glad that they brought him back in to not reprise his character, but we all know who he is and why they brought him in. You know.
And this is just me, I don't know if I want to say fantasizing, but there's a mystery to Van Damme's character in that. So like in your head you can sort of think, wait, is he actually Kurt Sloan? Without them,
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Or maybe he still went through similar things in his own life, which I think he probably did.
I would like to think that.
And then you have Michael Kesey or Kissy or whatever you want to call him, Ton Po. He actually has a cameo appearance in the jail cell.
Oh yeah.
It was probably just a little Easter egg or just a little guest spot, but Van Damme and him share a quick look before Van Damme just leaves him behind. I thought that was kind of
yeah. I like that they put that in there. I watched that one once. I need to go back, watch that again.
Yeah. Some people like the follow-up better, but Van Damme gets some really good fight scenes alongside.
He does, and I'm glad that they gave him some fight scenes with Elaine Mousy, I think is how you say his name. Ellen or Elaine.
Yeah.
But, we need more straight-up martial arts stars like him and Adkins, so, you gotta get behind guys like that.
Yeah. Alright, I guess we could talk about the Kickboxer franchise all day, but...
Right.
Yeah.
So that was your number...
3.
That was your number 3, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Top
now,
2.
Yeah. But, now, my number 3 is, in its rightful spot on my list. It's one that's probably not high for a lot of people out there. Like, I know, other people like it, but I hold this in such high regard and close to home because it's the very first Van Damme movie that I seen when it was new, so it was a big deal. I don't think I went to theaters to see it, but I specifically remember the first night I watched it at home, and it's The Quest.
Oh, okay, I don't know why I forgot about that one for you.
I have to, come on, if it's my personal list, The Quest is essentially me. I love that movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't agree with people who say it's a carbon copy of what he did in Bloodsport.
Well, I don't care for it as much as you do, but I still like it fine, and I defended it before too against a person who should be unnamed. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you got the tournament, obviously, but the circumstances around it are so different.
I like the clown aspect.
Yeah. It's kind of like Van Damme's, epic. What's that old adventure of Ulysses?
Mm-hmm.
His epic, quest. But they really make a really cool adventure story out of it. Him coming from nothing and living on the streets as homeless kids and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And running from authorities and jumping on a ship going who knows where.
Mm-hmm.
It's just
James Raymer.
Oh yeah, that's one thing I love about it. Such a great cast.
Mm-hmm.
Is that how you say his name, Raymer?
Remmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I always said Ramar, but I could be wrong. But he's great in it. He's actually Maxie Divine. He's not, Van Damme takes his name in it.
Mm-hmm.
He's a boxer in it.
Yeah.
He's great in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got Sir Roger Moore.
Mm-hmm.
In one of his most memorable roles. You can't trust him right off the bat, but Van Damme needs to get places, so. Hey, Jake, just 1 second. We're going to have to pause it for a second.
Alright. Mm-hmm.
Like I said, it's always one that I had a soft spot for. The tournament aspect of it is phenomenal, too. It's just epic.
Mm-hmm.
And memorable, and great bad guy in it as well, I think, So, The Quest is always one that I've loved, so, I have to put it high on my list.
Mm-hmm. Alright, well, I hear you. I'm not gonna, put you down for it. Like I said, even if it's not one of my favorite Van Damme films, it's may or may not be my least favorite, but even at that point, I still like and I'd watch it before, many other, stars' work, so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so now we're to number 2.
Yep, that's right, and you probably know my top 2.
And you know my top 2.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, my number 2 is definitely going to be Lionheart. And Lionheart was directed again by a name we keep bringing up, Sheldon Littich, who co-wrote this again alongside Van Damme and also S.N. Warren. You have Brian Thompson again, supporting in this. You have Deborah Rennard as Cynthia, if you remember her.
The girl that gets turned down by Van Damme.
I liked her. I could see her appeal, but luckily Van Damme's character was a better man than I am. So, and then you have of course, the widow character.
Mm-hmm. And let me jump in and just say, Lionheart is my number 2 as well.
Oh.
So that works out.
Yeah. Yeah, the actress who played the widow, the woman he's trying to help out, I actually thought she gave a pretty good performance when we've seen her too. And again, it's turns into like another fighting tournament movie, but you have an extra character drive to it. You have his best friend character, Harrison Page, who I thought was really charismatic alongside Van Damme. You have Michael Queasy in it again, playing a very different character from Tun Po, actually helping out Van Damme towards the end. Yeah, he is even the more sympathetic one earlier on too.
Yeah, so. He's one of the guys that's after him for going AWOL. Yeah, Lionheart, because I could make a case for it to be my number 1. I just always loved it. Love the movie. It's a more serious tone to his other tournament movies. It's more real. But he gives essentially one of his better acting performances in his early career too.
I mean, sure, the ending is kind of cheesy. When he runs back, down the street, to rejoin the family and such. But it's still nice, and it kind of fills in that void that Nowhere to Run left you off with. So.
Yeah. And that's a good ending.
Yeah, I know. You can appreciate both of them, but.
Harrison Page was his name, his buddy in it.
Yeah, that was the actor. He played Joshua.
Yeah, I don't know why, but he went against Van Damme and betting against him.
Yeah.
But that led to one of the coolest lines in the movie, is wrong bet, it's a really good put together fight scene, seeing Van Damme get beat to all hell and still be able to come back. And that's what makes really great fight scenes to me, is it's the storytelling of it. It's not just a beat down like some other actors do.
And you have that really good shot of Van Damme where he's just punching him over and over at the end in the crowd, and the bloodied fist in the face and everything. And
yeah, it's one of the essential Van Damme movies for sure. And I love the different locations they do for all the underground fights. It's really cool. But the widow of his brother or whatever, and she was annoying to me. The ungrateful person up until later in the movie. But it is what it is with that character. But yeah, it's definitely always been one of my favorites for sure.
Well, you want to go number 1, or do you want me to?
Oh, well, we can switch off and on, so I'll do my number 1 first.
Alright.
Unless you want to go first.
No, you take it, man.
Alright, so my number one can't be anything else. It has to be Bloodsport. there was martial arts stars before that. You know, you had Chuck Norris, Bruce Lee, and everything. But this is one that launched a different generation of artists. You know, inspired martial artists to get into movies. Inspired them to do martial arts. And it spawned a lot of copycat type movies. But you know, I'm no martial artist, but it inspired me to love it. You know.
Yeah, there's an old picture of you doing the splits when you were a little kid too.
I could do the splits back in the day. Yeah, it inspired my love for the genre and martial arts itself. And it's just a huge, amazing 80s movie. You know, from the soundtrack to the huge personality, memorable characters. And, you know, the tournament itself is amazing, but you got these other great scenes that stick with you too. Like you mentioned, you know, like the friendship between him and Ray is one of the things that's awesome about the movie. Ray Jackson is one of my favorite supporting characters ever. You know, he's a good, strong fighter in his own right, but not as disciplined, obviously, as Van Damme is. You know, he's drinking beer before the fight.
A little different discipline, you know, there. But.
Yeah, he's a great character in it, you know. And you got Chong Li Bolo Yoon, or Young, however you want to say his name. You know, he's a great bad guy. I don't know if he's my favorite now. You know, you're slaying me on Dong Po, but you know, I still love him in it, and I love the brick scene. The dim Mac, however you say that move he does with breaking the bottom brick. He says, "You break brick, the brick don't hit back." You know, so many memorable lines and characters in that movie. The scene where he does that coin trick. You know, yeah, it's, like I said, I gotta put it number one because it inspired my love for these movies for sure.
Yeah, like I said, it did sort of, you know, reset the bar, reset the precedent, you know, laid out by guys like Norris, and I think it, I don't know, rejuvenated that, you know, classic traditional type of, you know, martial arts film.
Exactly, it really did. And, you know, I like the reporter. I wish I could think of her name off the top of my head. I know it. She's good in it, you know. But, yeah, I just love everything about the movie. The early scenes of him training, telling his master he can do it and everything.
Leah Iris.
Yeah, Leah Ayres or something like that, yeah.
I got a computer right here, so.
Yeah, I like her in it, but yeah. You know, I love her in it, in the early training scenes, him stealing the sword.
Yeah.
And him learning different ways and everything.
Now, I know they get romantically involved at a certain point, and there's a classic Van Damme butt shot, I believe, so, yeah.
So, yeah, the quintessential 80s martial arts movie that opened the floodgates for the genre we love. So, that's my number one.
Alright, I can't really dispute that one. I can see, you know, if that one got into my system like it did yours when it did, you know.
Yeah.
We'd probably be having an even more similar conversation here.
Yeah.
So.
Well, that's why different, you know, lists are personal to each person, you know.
But, yeah, I think you know what my number one is. And my number one is, this is probably not many others' number one, but it's mine, like we said, and that is Cyborg, also known as Slinger. It was directed by Albert Pyun, and this is one I have a collector's edition for. I also have the Lionheart one. I do need to get the Double Impact one. But this is like the greatest example for me of genre meshing. You know, my love for Van Damme and the martial arts meshed with how much I love, you know, post-apocalyptic settings, and you know, you have a pretty memorable villain, you know, as well, you know, as with a Fender, played by Vincent Klein, who my fiance didn't like. She thought his voice was over the top or something like that, but
it fit the movie.
Yeah.
It really fit the movie to me.
You know, his eyes, you know, I'm not debating who's creepy or not, but his eyes, you know, remind me of like that Sandman kind of thing too.
Yeah.
And then another thing I give it credit to is one of his co-stars in the movie, and that is you know, Deborah Richter, who is basically a scavenger he comes across and ends up helping. You know, she's named Natty in the movie. Again, if you want to call her a Van Damme girl or not, I don't want to put her that simply. But she's probably my favorite female co-star of any of his films, actually. There's just something about her, you know, she's cute, but yeah, there's a decent Bond aspect there. Not only James Bond, but just their kind of, and just how they develop together.
Yeah.
Just something about it really worked for me. They don't dive deep into it, but there's that time where they almost, you know, hook up on the beach, and, you know, Van Damme doesn't take it at a certain point because because what happened to his wife, but it just wasn't the right time, and the ending gets me because, you know, Fender ends up killing her off. You know, again, you have one of those, you know, moody final fight scenes in the dark and everything.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoy, and it starts raining. I absolutely love the final fight. It's, you know, crazy, you know, Fender keeps coming back like the Terminator. And there's that shot, you know, they add this little bit of character to it with when she's killed and Van Damme's finally able to kill Fender. You have her body laying on the car, and he's just sort of, you know, has his hands on the car looking over her and everything, and it resonated with me kind of well. You have, like, the actual cyborg woman in it, but I think it was Deborah Richter that actually really kind of solidified that end of it. Then you have some really nice martial arts scenes as well. You have that gun he's using as well, and
yeah,
you know, some decent chase sequences. There's the sewer thing, which I know is, you know, was cut up kind of quite a bit. You know, he takes the guy's head off. You get that great shot of him, you know, doing the splits over the guy when he walks under him.
Yeah.
But, you know, apparently we actually could have seen that happen, you know, instead of it being cut. But
yeah,
then Van Damme's crucified at one point, and my fiance even thought that was a, you know, a well done scene, you know, from an acting standpoint. And, you know, he doesn't feel invincible either. Again, that's something Van Damme did well, you know. So I absolutely just love Cyborg. You know, it has like a little steampunk thing going for it too. You know, some of the costume designs, and I really like the sets, you know, just how they litter the sets with, you know, trash and just, you know, make it look like ruins. And I could go on and on about Cyborg, and I watch the behind the scenes stuff extensively, so it's, you know, it's maybe a little bit too much going on for some people maybe, but I love it. It's my favorite Van Damme film out of many Van Damme films I love.
And I understand, you know, like, it's one of those crossover movies that made you want to check out Van Damme. So I understand why you, you know, hold that so highly. And there's one that I love more and more with each watch, too. You know, I said that I see it as a over-the-top, fun, B-type movie, you know. When I say B movie with all the love in the world, you know, that vibe, you know. But yeah, I could, you know, Cyborg was considered for my top 10 for sure.
Yeah, so you wounded me by not even having it there, but, you know, we've had that conversation before, so.
Yeah, so, like I said, yeah, Cyborg is definitely a classic movie. It should have done a lot better than it did, I think, you know.
I haven't watched the, you know, direct-to-video sequel with Angelina Jolie, but...
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's our, you know, top 10 Van Damme films that we've probably been talking about for roughly an hour and a half.
Yeah.
So thank everyone who listened at all, or even straight through for some godforsaken reason. But, you know, we did this for you guys, but we did this for us too. We've been meaning to kind of just bring our mutual love for the guy together and just talk about it extensively as he deserves. So I had a lot of fun doing this.
Exactly, and I had a lot of fun too, and like I said, you know, you loving these movies like I do these days, and something that I'm very happy about, and very, it's very cool that you're into it as well.
Hmm.
And my Van Damme list is always changing here and there, so who knows, we might do another list of some kind of his.
Yeah, for sure.
We can always talk about Van Damme, and want to thank everybody for listening as well. This will be spread around a lot of locations. So.
Hmm. And if I'll post it on my YouTube, obviously, it'll go to Action Elite. I'm sure you'll share it in some of the other groups as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So, it's been fun. We could talk about it for a lot longer, but unfortunately, we have lives as well. So.
Yeah. Well, this is our life. We just have some adult obligations here, so.
Yeah. All right.
All right. Thank you guys, and I'll catch you guys next time. Peace.